The source of a majority of the intercultural conflict we face is due to a lack of communication caused by mistrust within the parties in which conflict occurs. A significant intercultural conflict was over the construction of the Keystone Pipeline in 2016 between Energy Transfer Partners and the Standing Rock Sioux. The construction of the Keystone Pipeline led to a large amount of protest by the Standing Rock Sioux. The protests took place over the beliefs that the pipeline was being built on an ancient burial ground and would possibly be contaminating the reservation's water supply. The protests last months, in which many were injured. This conflict occurred right near my hometown, and it got me asking many questions. How did anyone allow the conflict to get this bad? Why weren't preventative measures taken to avoid this? Why did people have to get hurt over this piece of metal? I came to the conclusion that the mistrust of Energy Transfer Partners, who was closely associated with government organization, was the cause of this conflict. In this speech, I will discuss exactly how mistrust led to the conflict over the Keystone Pipeline and how the media promoted the mistrust of the government over time and how it could have been resolved. There has been mistrust brewing between the Standing Rock Sioux and the government for hundreds of years. Over the course of time, the U.S. government has committed horrible acts against Native American tribes across the United States. We have given the Standing Rock Sioux no reason to think that the pipeline could be anything but an attempt to take away their land. When Christopher Columbus landed in the Americas, he claimed the land for his own, despite the fact that there were already numerous civilizations already settled in this part of the world. On top of forcing natives off their land, Europeans committed a massive genocide of Native Americans. They were forced into slavery and exposed to a large amount of violence. Along with being forced into slavery, Native Americans were also forced to convert to Christianity. While Europeans were traveling across the Americas, they brought a variety of new diseases that wiped out a large percentage of the Native American population and had long, everlasting impacts on the people in this area. For the next hundreds of years, the Native American tribes faced a tremendous amount of discrimination and violence from incoming European settlers. In the 1830s, there was a forced relocation of Native Americans called the Trail of Tears. The Trail of Tears is a relocation of Native Americans that spans across many states and led to the death of about 6,000 Native Americans from many different tribes. There have been over 500 treaties between Native American tribes and the U.S. that the U.S. has broken. This mistrust between the two parties has been brewing for centuries, and the U.S. has given the Native Americans no reason to believe that when we come onto their lands, we aren't trying to take it away from them. A contributing factor to the conflict between the Standing Rock Sioux and Energy Transfer Partners is the enormous lack of communication between the two parties. The Standing Rock tribe was invited to numerous meetings regarding the Keystone Pipeline, but failed to attend. The attendance of these meetings would have increased the communication between the two cultures, possibly avoiding these protests. The communication lacked in this intercultural conflict was due to a mistrust of Energy Transfer Partners. This mistrust, without a doubt, is caused by the history that North Dakotan Native American tribes have with the government, or in this case, companies associated with the government. To the tribe, it looks as if the government was trying to take over their land again. The building of this pipeline over suspected Native Americans' land is a form of cultural imperialism. According to Martin and Nakayama's 2019 text, Intercultural Communication and Context, cultural imperialism is the domination through the spread of cultural products. In this case, the cultural products being the pipeline, representing America's corporate greed and lack of appreciation for Native American culture. This mistrust was most likely due to the power relationships between the government and Native American tribes. The Native Americans were afraid of the government due to the previous wrongs they have committed against them. The media has promoted the government and corporations in a negative light that has allowed many to side with the Standing Rock Sioux over the Keystone Pipeline controversy. News sources and online journalists have had bias in their stories that persuaded people to side with the Native Americans on this issue and made Energy Transfer Partners look like the bad guys. There were many news sources that came out with false information and were classified as fake news, as was popular during the time. A large amount of bias in the media led to a significant increase in the number of protesters at each site. Movie stars and presidential candidates even joined these protesters, according to The Guardian's 2016 article by Sam Levin, Dakota Access Pipeline, the who, the what, and the why of the Standing Rock protests. In 2007, the movie Shooter came out. The plot is very similar to the intercultural conflict faced over the Keystone Pipeline. In this movie, a soldier unknowingly partook in the genocide of hundreds of Africans in order for the U.S. to build a pipeline across their land. This movie exemplifies the assumption that the government is greedy and will do anything to make a few bucks. It plays into the belief that the government takes advantage of Native Americans and treats them with disrespect. It gives the perception of the evil government and gives the Native Americans the perception of being the victims. In order to avoid another intercultural conflict such as this one, changes need to happen according to how we handle these situations. The media blew this event out of proportion, making Energy Transfer Partners look like a greedy corporation trying to exploit the Standing Rock Sioux by building on their land without their consent. In the future, the media needs to be more cautious in the words they use and who they place the blame on. Due to the Native Americans' history, the media assumed that the government was a bad guy, when in fact the whole situation was a miscommunication. Another change that would need to be made is how the government handles situations such as this. After the protest started, the police used aggressive crowd-controlled tactics. This only made situations worse. It made it look like the government was attacking Native American tribes. If the police would have taken into account the communication in context concept, they would have known that this is a sensitive issue and other methods would be preferred. The police were not very tactful in their approach to the protesters. According to MindTool's 2016 online article, How to Be Tactful, tact is the ability to tell the truth in a way that considers other people's feelings and reactions. If the government had been more tactful, they would have been able to limit the amount of backlash they faced. The intercultural conflicts faced by the construction of the Keystone Pipeline between the Standing Rock Sioux and Energy Transfer Partners is due to a mistrust and a power dynamic between the two parties. The mistrust between these two parties has been brewing for centuries due to all the wrongs Americans have committed against the indigenous people who had ruled this land long before us. The media fed on this mistrust in order to promote their personal agenda. This mistrust led to a lack of communication, which ultimately led to this particular intercultural conflict. When communicating with other cultures, we need to be sure to take into account the historical context and power dynamic to make sure we can avoid another intercultural conflict such as this one.